Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Geezer here, and it has been a while since I made a video, but I'm feeling better about it. I'm feeling good, and I think it is time to make a new video. So that's what we're doing today, because I'm feeling good about it. So, let's just say I almost quit like 4 times. I came back, was talking to Sky last night. She kind of settled my insecurities of recording and made me feel like, oh yeah, I can do this again. I'm ready to get back into it. So I'm back. And let's just say today we're going to be retelling a story. Today, the story I'm going to be retelling is my back surgery story because I did that one terribly. And I'm going to retell all the stories I already told, as well as come out with some new content within the next couple months. So hopefully I can stay with it and keep working. But anyway, let's get into the story. So it was one November or December night. I was standing in my grandparents' house, and my grandfather cranks the heat up super high. So it wasn't cold in there at all. It was actually warm. You would think you were standing in the summertime where he keeps the temperature. It was that hot. So we're standing there, and I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, it's super hot in here. So I took my hoodie off. I was standing there in my t-shirt, and my grandmother's like, are you standing weird or something? And I'm like, no, I'm standing just as I normally do. She's like, oh, pull up your shirt. I'm like, why? Because I want to see if your back is messed up or something. So little did I know, she looks at my back and she's like, oh, you have scoliosis. Well, she didn't say, oh, you have scoliosis. She said, oh, your back looks messed up or something. So then the very next day, my mom scheduled me a doctor's appointment at my family doctor. So the next day, I get out of school. I think it was a school night. I went to the doctor, and the doctor's like, well, you have scoliosis. I'm like, oh. And immediately my mom started to bawl. I mean, I guess there's no good way to take it when you learn that your kid has a pretty bad problem in his back that could eventually cripple him if nothing's taken care of over time. But I got out of that appointment. The whole way home, my mom cried. We came home to my grandmother and my brother. He didn't know what was going on. It didn't matter to him. He didn't care. All he knew is that he was a little kid and he was trying to have some fun. So he was just playing around and everything. I came back, sat in my bedroom, played my computer with my friends, told them what was up. Oh, whatever, whatever. And that was it for a while. And then I went to the doctor a couple months later. They're like, oh, well, you really need to start moving on this and do something. So they set me up with a appointment at one of the Geisinger hospitals that's kind of local to me. So me, my brother, and my grandmother, and my mom, yeah, the four of us, we all got in the car, drove up to this hospital. We went inside, and they're like, oh, okay, so let's talk about the procedure and stuff right in front of me. And I didn't want no parts of it. I just wanted to get it fixed and be done with it. They're like, oh, well, you can have a spinal fusion. You could have it tethered. If it wasn't this bad, you could also get a brace put on your back, and you would just have to wear this brace every day for some time. And they're talking about how they'd have to cut down a certain area of my back and go in and put rods in and stuff. That's called a spinal fusion, if you are wondering. A tether, what they do is they put like something around your backbone and they tether it off to something and it pulls it tight, and you have to go back every now and then to get that tightened and stuff. So let me just say the route I chose was the spinal fusion, and I didn't like this whole idea at this Geisinger hospital. I wasn't very okay with it, and I didn't I didn't know like what was going on. I was littler. Like it was like 2016 this happened, so I was like 14, 13 or 14 at the time. And I was 13 at the time of this. So then a couple more doctor's appointments come by and go. My dad comes home from work one night and he says, "Oh, well, my one friend at work, his daughter had it, and this is where they went. They said they treated him super well, took good care of him and everything." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So then my dad made an appointment for me there. That's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is in my same state. So it wasn't that big of a deal. I didn't have to travel 1,000 miles to go get my back checked every time or something, or for my surgery. So we went down. I had an orientation meeting for it and everything. And the doctor's like, "Oh, hi, my name is so and so." I don't want to say his name, obviously. We all shook his hand. He was a younger doctor. Very kind, I will say. He's like, "Okay, well, we have your surgery date set for this date." I think it was 2016 yet. Maybe it was 2017. No, it was 2016. I'm like, "Oh, okay." Maybe it was before that even. I can't remember. Might have been 2015. I haven't checked my facts on it lately, so. And they're like, "Oh, well, it's set for September 30th of this year." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So as time slowly progressed, I got more and more nervous, more and more scared, and I realized the height of the situation. So after some time of being completely terrified, I had to go to this appointment. And when I had to get my first IV put in, and this was the first IV I ever had to get put in, and I wanted to just run away. I wanted to get out of there. I wanted it to be done. So then I had one IV in my arm. I had to sleep with that IV in. And I remember having that IV in with just what they had in it. It felt like there was like, my fingers had like needles in them and everything. There was no needles in my fingers, but it just felt weird. It felt tingly all throughout my arm up to my shoulder, and it all felt weird. So I'm laying there in this hospital bed, and the doctor comes in. He talks to us a little bit. He sends me to the bathroom, and I had to get some laxatives and stuff so I would clear out my digestive system, so that upon getting put under, I wouldn't like I wouldn't yeah, I wouldn't let out anything. So I went to the bathroom. He talked to my mom and dad about the surgery. My grandfather came down to see me, and he was there by my side for most of the surgery. So the next morning rolls around, like 6 in the morning. They come in, they wake me up. They're like, "How do you sleep?" "Oh, I slept terribly. I'm so uncomfortable with this IV in my arm." And they're like, "Oh." So I I was taken down to the med bay, not med bay, the post surgery, or the pre surgery, the pre op. Got taken down there, and they're like, "Do you want to walk down or do you want to ride down?" And they gave me the option to either lay in the bed that I was in and get taken down, or I could just walk. And I'm like, "Oh, I'll walk." So I got in the elevator. They put the bed in. They're like, "You better not try and run away." And mind you, I wasn't gonna do no running, not in some robe and stuff, because I don't like those things, and I know that people would have seen some stuff if I would have tried to run away. So I just stayed there. Got taken down. They hooked up the anesthesia to my IV in my arm, and I passed out right there, talking to my mom and dad. "Dylan, how do you feel?" "Oh, okay." So I passed out in minutes, and my dad told me that my mom and him both started bawling once they started to wheel me away in the bed through the doors to the surgery room. So they went upstairs with my grandparents. And as far as, or as of what I know, my grandfather was a worried mess waiting for me to get done surgery. They waited for me for 8 hours. I was laying on my stomach for 8 hours getting my surgery done. And maybe I'll throw some pictures in of like my X-rays and stuff that I have and stuff. But I wake up later on. I think a full day passed. Like I was out for a full day, I think. Woke up, my grandfather was right there with me, my mom, my nan, my dad, or not my dad. My dad and my brother were where they were staying because my dad didn't want my brother to see me like I was, put under and everything. So, my grandfather was there with me when I woke up and everything. That was nice. My grandparents always have my back. It's honestly the greatest thing to have your family with you. So, they were there with me. I woke up. The nurse I had a um I'll just put it in text in the video what it's called. I forget what it's called. I can't think of it. So I had one of those in. Once I'll put it in the video. I forget what it is, but I had one of them things in the and they're like, okay, well we're gonna take it out now. I was like, huh? So I'm laying there in this bed, and they rip it out. And I just go, ah, really loud. I start screaming because it hurt. And they're like, okay, well now you have to use the bathroom by yourself. I'm like, oh. So I stood up, kind of. They had to put their arms underneath my arms to hold me up like a soldier pretty much who's injured and getting drug away. So they had to hold me up. I went to the bathroom in the toilet for the first time. They're like, oh, you have to brush your teeth now. And I had to hold myself up, or they had to help me hold myself up while I brushed my teeth. So I was a little bit shaky. I was, like, my whole body was shaking from probably nervousness and what blood I had lost, and the fact that I have a giant cut in my back now. So I was put back in bed, and then they're like, okay, we're gonna take you down to your room again, the room where I was set up. And for most of my stay in the hospital, I had this room all to myself. It was a room where there would be 4 beds for 4 people with just dividing curtains, and thankfully I was alone for most of the time. So they're like, okay, well, Dylan, we're gonna take you for a walk now. And like, I have to walk already. Like, yeah, you have to walk. Like, are you sure I can walk? They're like, everybody walks this time. So the nurse helps me out of bed. There was a very specific way I had to get out of bed. I had to roll onto my side, and they would put their arm under like my arm, and they would like their hand under my arm to where my armpit is, and they'd help me sit up straight so I didn't curve my back or anything. And then we would stand me up very carefully. Mind you, I still had all the IVs and the machines attached to me. So while I walked, the 2 nurses took my arms and just had to help me walk, and my mom pushed my IV thing behind me. And it was the shakiest thing, me walking. It was like training a toddler how to walk again. That's how it felt. I was so nervous walking. I was like, oh, I don't want to fall. And then I did a full lap around the wing, and I sat back down. And I'm very restless at times, but I didn't like sitting up because the chair I had to sit in was very uncomfortable. So what I would do is, rather than sitting in the chair, I would just go for long walks around the hall. And after a couple days, they came in and they're like, oh, okay, so this is what's going to happen. You have to walk 25 laps today around or sit in your chair for an hour. So I stood up and I did 25 laps. Thankfully, after that was done, they let me put my own clothes back on. So I put a pair of jogging pants on that I'd never wear and a t-shirt, and I started walking again. So by the very last day I was there, I did 125 laps, I think it was close to, they said. And I think I had a lot, like, I think I had close to 1,000 in total. And they wouldn't leave the hospital until I had a bowel movement. So that means I had to stay till I had a full-on movement. But within this time, I I had eaten salads. I couldn't eat burgers. I tried many times. So they're like, "Okay, well, this is what's going to happen. You have to wait till you make a full movement." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And it takes me like a week or two at a time regularly. So for this and not having anything in my stomach from puking it all up all the time, I knew that it was going to take some time. So eventually they just let me go because I was not making the movement I needed to. So they're like, "Okay, well, we're just going to let you go. You're obviously going to be fine," stuff. But we're not to that point in the story where I left yet. So, my first time trying prune juice, I was doing laps, and this one nurse is like, "Oh, well, why don't you try it? Why don't you try it?" And she was like the main nurse that watched over me. And I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to try it. I don't think I'm going to like it. I don't want to try it." And she's like, I'm like, "Well, have you ever tried it?" She's like, "No, I've never tried it." I'm like, "How about this? We both try it then." So on one of my walks, they got a can for the both of us in 2 cups. She poured it more in my cup, less in her cup. She drank it, didn't care for it. I had the whole, like, more of it, and I just went bottoms up on it. And I hated it. I hated every second of it. I was like, "Oh, I need Mountain Dew." Like, "You can't have Mountain Dew yet." Like, no. So I continued my laps that day. And they're like, "Okay, well, you have to go to physical therapy today." I'm like, "Physical therapy? For what?" At this point, I was walking pretty much normal. I still had all the IVs in my arm and everything. So they're like, "You have to learn how to go upstairs and stuff." They're like, "Oh, well, can you go upstairs?" Or they're like, "Oh, do you go upstairs often?" I'm like, "Oh, just for school." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I had to face the staircase. And it was only like a 5-step flight that I had to go up, so it wasn't big. The therapist stood behind me, making sure I didn't go backwards. And I went up these 5 stairs like nothing. They're like, "Go down the stairs now." They stood in front of me to catch me in case I went forwards. And they're like, "Go back up, go down." I did that like 10 times. And then I just started doing laps again, just walking my laps. So we finally went back to my room. And this was the last day I was in the hospital now. And this other kid who was staying in the room, he came like that day. He came into the room and he started staying with me in that room. But he was on the other side of the room in the other corner. So there was like a diagonal between us. We never really talked or anything. And I was kind of alone in the room for most of the time, so I thought that was really nice. I had a nice view of part of the city, so it was really cool. The last day rolls around, they're like, "Okay, well, you have to start getting your stuff ready." My mom had all my bags packed and everything already. She was ready to go home. So was I. My brother wanted to stay because he was staying at the Ronald McDonald House. My dad wanted to go home. My grandparents left a couple days before this because my grandfather had to return to work. And I I finally was ready to go. They're like, "Okay, well, you need to do this and this yet before you leave." I was like, "Oh, what do I have to do?" They're like, "Well, we need you to go take an x-ray yet and fill out this paper, like, because I want to know how you feel after your surgery, like if you're disgusted with yourself afterwards, or if you think it makes you better or what." I'm like, just answering baseline answers because I felt the same. I just felt like me. I didn't feel like I was crazy awesome or anything now. I mean, yeah, I do pick on some people. I'm like, they're like, "Oh, I have back pain." I'm like, Yeah, so do I, bud. And like, shut up. I'm like, why? Because we get it. You have scoliosis. I'm like, yeah, I know. And I mean, after something like this happens to you, you kind of accept it, and it really doesn't bug you anymore. It doesn't bug me one bit now, knowing that my back is now has titanium rods and screws in it. But I mean, when it comes down to it, I can say, oh yeah, well, I mean, I'm part metal. And just think if I ever have to get my hip replaced, I'll really have some metal on me. So that was pretty cool. I thought that my surgery was kind of interesting and all. And after, all that time and surgery and everything, I realized it's nothing. I was worried over nothing. This was a surgery that was done thousands and thousands of times, and my recovery time was less than most people. So I was so amazed. I went home. I came home to a surprise. My bed was in the living room. Everything that was under my bed was just still laying there, and my room was kind of messed up a little bit. I had my TV where it is, my computer where it is, and I remember coming home and I bought GTA 5. My dad took me to GameStop the one day. I bought GTA 5 for PS4. I played it a good bit. When I was off on my surgery break, I played it a good bit. The one problem I had when I was off was I couldn't get back support like in my chair because I had just a regular office chair that's has the shoulder height back. So I really didn't have any good back support there. So I would have to like actually work to sit up by myself, which I mean it was good for, getting my strength built back up. So I went through all that, played GTA 5. I got to a certain point in the story, and the lady who was coming to tutor me while I was on leave from school was here. So she came in, she's like, blah, 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 this and this. Do this work for when I come over next time. And I was like, oh, okay. So I had the work done for the next time she came over. And by the end of it, I really wasn't enthused by it. And then it turns out the next school year, my ninth grade school year, I actually had her as a teacher, which was kind of crazy. So we're kind of getting to the end of the story now where things kind of just die down. I had back pain, like not back pain from it being sore, but like people would touch it and it would cause me a ton of pain. And this one kid, he would always poke it and everything and be like, oh, a cripple. So he always would do that to me and everything. And I was like, oh, well. The one day I was walking down the hallway in school not paying attention. He came up behind me, put his hand on my back, and I dropped to the floor just full on. So, I mean, I was okay, but it just hurt. A little bit surprising when somebody comes up and just shoves their hand on your back and you drop. But anyway, guys, that's kind of the story of my back surgery and everything, how it happened and stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed. This is the retell of it. I think I did better. If not, sorry guys. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.